Tanguy from Daft Punk. Hi.
Hello, Pete.
Hello.
It's been a while. I was working this out since we probably last did an interview. It was probably 8 or 9 years ago.
At least. It might have been even 10 or 11 years ago, yes.
So, Random Access Memory is your first studio album since Human After All back in 2005. Why so long?
I mean, we could consider that Random Access Memories is our first studio album ever, in some sense, because it's the first time we actually went into a studio to record a record. But the last 8 years were filled with different experiences, from going on tour for almost a year and a half or 2 years in 2006 and 2007, then working on Tron in 2009 and part of 2010. But mostly we were interested in taking the time to reinvent ourselves and see where we could go next. And we were really experimenting all these years in the studio. It was not like we started really, even though we started making the music on this record somehow, recording some demos in 2008. I think for a very long time we just wanted to experiment and see what we could do that we hadn't done before and what was exciting. And usually it takes time, The gap between our first and second album was 4 years. Between the second and the third was another 3 or 4 years as well. So it was a little bit longer this time, but the project at the same time was more ambitious and doing certain things that we hadn't done before, and that took longer time to design.
I've heard the album, just as a kind of fan of yours and knowing you for so long. The first thought I had sitting listening to it was giving me goosebumps, was that it was almost like you got to make the record you always wanted to make, maybe. Born in the 70s, it's like a homage to that period of time of your childhood. To just talk us through the thought process of, how you went about making this record and why you made it in the way you made it.
Well, it's true that we've always loved and cherished a certain craft and a certain kind of records that influenced us from the time we started making music. And if you listen to around the world, for example, we've always loved Chic, Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards music, but we, in some sense, this track already on Homework was a certain homage and of doing music that we really were doing in a home studio, and that's what we come from a house music background, and that's what Chicago house music was. Chicago house kind of was born after the destruction or the collapse of disco, and it was this way of these producers or these young producers in their basement with a drum machine and a synth, trying to make something that would look like a record, that might not be a record, but in some sense we're emerged from that tradition and of working in a home studio and pretending to do record, and so it really felt that this album was the same music that we've always done, and you're right to say it's maybe the record we always wanted to do, because it felt like we're doing the same thing, but this time we're doing it for real. There was a golden age of music making where albums were these ambitious projects and in a certain way, a certain kind of teamwork with a certain level of craftsmanship from the musicians to the engineers to the studios and that were creating this kind of magic. And after the Tron record, where we were able to experience this teamwork with an orchestra, which was extremely exciting for us to go out of our home studio and just having worked just the two of us for so many years and being able to open up with other musicians, we felt, wow, we're really excited to maybe we could do our music like that for this record. That's the Tron record somehow gave us the key of a direction that we could take, which was focusing on, as you said, like doing the same music, but replacing to a certain extent the machines with the people. And really also, we've always loved sampling and we're like really wondering what was the magic in those samples, what was the magic in those little bits of of life and of snippets of audio recordings that had so much sparkle somehow,
soul as well,
soul, and because it's still like an F chord or a C chord, it's sometimes it's pretty simple, but there's so much life in it that we felt like that would be a very interesting experiment to see if we can make a record using of recreating a certain set of circumstances to maybe feel like the golden age of these records is not over, to bring it back.
You've almost created a new record for other people to sample.
It somehow all started with the drums and looking at, wow, it was somehow a fantasy of ours to say we'd love to do a club track or dance music track with the real drummer. And
like the old disco records.
Like the old disco records, or like some disco, if you take Kiss by Prince, it's not really disco, but it's just a track that has this kind of timeless feel, and it felt like, wow, the drums might be an interesting angle. So by transforming some of our demos that we had with session players and live drummers and rhythm sections, and then really trying to create a certain sonic universe from that record, totally on a blank canvas, where we're not using any existing sounds that have been used in other recordings, seems to be an interesting challenge.
How? Let's just talk about a few of the collaborators. Pharrell Williams, you produced Hypnotize You, didn't you?
We produced Hypnotize You. We've always, been big fans of him as a producer, a writer and composer, and a performer. And here, he totally went on board the idea of, went for the ride of saying, the golden age of these classic records is not over, and he really nailed it in a fantastic way for us, as being like this perfect match of being this performer in a certain tradition, but really into the future.
With Get Lucky, what came first? You had the track with Niall, and then he came on the end.
Actually, with Get Lucky, we had the track. Even without Niall, for a very long time, there was just like this somehow disco groove that we had made with Omar Hakim on the drums and Nathan East on the bass, and then we added Niall. Songs were built over, sometimes even in terms of recordings, over 2.5 years, traveling all over the world in different studios, and each time adding a certain layer. That was what was fun for Get Lucky. Once we had Niall, and Niall happened in the very same organic way, he jammed on the tracks and added these amazing chord inversions and things like that with his guitar. Then we really went back with Nathan East, which is the bass player, and we had him redo the bass line so that it would fit with Niall, and almost became like this kind of funk competition, where you had this idea of really like musicians feeding
which is what they did back in the day.
Which is what they did back in the day, and so it's true that we felt like really being able to put this environment for this magic to happen.
He says he can't remember the recording session.
He cannot.
What happened?
Well, it was jet lag.
He gave him something to drink or something.
No, he cannot. No, it's funny.
He brought his drinks. Yeah, his liquor. He has a liquor.
He had a liquor that he brought. Yeah, which is the liquor. The liquor.
His own brand. His own brand. Yeah.
It's a mesmerising lyric and performance. I'm not a great lyric person. I ran out of the listening room. I wrote them down. Actually, it was just such a simple refrain, but such a meaningful.
I think that's when you arrive. If he doesn't remember and the jet lag and everything, I think there was some magic that happened, And so he listened to the track. We sat down, and he got really fast into the vibe and wanted to sing like really spontaneously, and everything came out in like a couple of hours.
So he didn't have those lyrics worked out?
No, everything. That's why he doesn't remember, because it was like so spontaneous and instant. It was just a fast sparkle of magic, and I think he channeled like some of the best soul and R&B that he's been listening to, like us, like big fans of Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder. Even his voice is not sounding
Curtis Mayfield as well.
Yeah. His voice is sounding really different to me, and it was like meant to be, I guess.
Let's talk quickly about Giorgio Moroder. Amazing track, a spoken word track. It takes me back to kind of the old disco era where you'd have a symphony on one side of an album. Was that kind of the the target that you wanted to get with that?
The idea was to really have an ability to make a track about a musician's life, and you know, Giorgio's career is amazing. It starts in the Italian Alps, you know, as this kid that then becomes a musician, doing like easy listening music, playing in hotel lounges in the early 60s. Then he moves to Germany and has this career in German pop music. Then he starts disco with Donna Summer and somehow techno as well with Midnight Express, and moves to America and has all this amazing career in film scoring. So it really shows that there are no rules, and that, you know, it was an innovator that really broke all the rules. And that's what this song is too. It's about, you know, it's about music in general too, which is Giorgio's life is a metaphor for music and for the freedom of music.
Feels like you wanted to promote his legend. It was almost like you wanted to tell the world about.
I don't think he needs us to promote his legend somehow, you know.
Well, maybe to a new generation.
Possibly. The ability to work with Giorgio, which is now 72 years old, or Paul Williams, and feeling those people really shaped us and influenced us and shaped us and inspired us as human beings, you know, and discovering their music and their art when we were kids. And even Niall pointed out that almost his introduction to disco was almost through Donna Summer, Love to Love You Baby, you know, that kind of like shaped also Chic in some sense, you know.
And just tell us about the Julian Casablancas track.
The Instant Crush track is a song we did with Julian from The Strokes. I mean, The Strokes is probably your favorite rock band, and we were thrilled and excited to be able to collaborate with him and to do something different, you know, to do something that we hadn't done before, to do something that he hadn't done before, which is at the junction a little bit of the music we like, you know. The great thing with all these collaborators is to realize how inspiring their music was to us, and discover also that our music was an inspiration for them too, you know.
You've got some of the old school involved in the album, DJ Falcon and Todd Edwards.
Yes.
How your roots still? A lot of people ask me to ask you this. Your roots in terms of your love for where the whole thing started. You still got a strong passion for?
Yes. Again,
underground house music. I
really feel that the variety of the love of music and the process that we have in this album, Random Access Memories, is really what the spirit of house music is, you know. You could play, you know, a Led Zeppelin track, and after a Marshall Jefferson track, and it had this freedom, this absence of formatted structure, you know. And the great thing with Todd Edwards and DJ Falcon is that these are producers that we really appreciate, and they turn out to be some of our best friends as well.
Yeah, Todd tells a great story on the collaborative video, which I advise everyone to go and see, but he'd never been to LA before, which was quite astounding.
I think, no, he'd been to LA, but, you know, you haven't been to LA until you go to the hills somehow.
Mulholland Drive.
You know, as long as, if you stay only on the flat, yeah, and you see just these kind of suburbia, you know, it's not at the same time to see the coyotes and the rattlesnakes in the hills.
Is home now LA for you, or you
no? It's Paris. So we live in Paris, but our creative offices are in LA, and we kind of commute, you know. So we're on a very regular basis in LA. This record was mostly recorded in America, but a lot of the production, most of the time, also we spent in our studio in Paris.
I tweeted actually to Radio 1 listeners and Evolution listeners about you know, what question to ask Daft Punk, and I reckon about 95% of the people tweeted me back saying, what is going to happen with the live show? Will there be a live show at some stage?
There's no plans right now. We always do things one step at a time. We hardly tour, and it's always really rare, but we want every step of what we're doing to be a special moment. And